By the end of this video, you should be able to render separate sections of your Unreal scenes in Unreal 5 as separate layers or image sequences that you can use in your 2D animated projects. And I'll also show you how to add some post-process effects to make the 3D scenes look a little bit more cartoony or painterly to make it tie more into whatever you're trying to animate. Um, so the first thing is you should have Unreal 5.7 or the most recent Unreal 5 installed. So if you go to Epic Games Launcher, which you hopefully have logged into and have opened up, you click on Unreal Engine, you go to Library, and you're going to press plus to install 5.7 if you don't have it, or whichever version. I'm going to press X, and then I'm going to launch Unreal Engine 5.7 from here, or you can do it from this drop-down menu up on the top right by selecting it. Okay, so once you do that, you're gonna get a window that looks like this. And then what we're gonna press is New Project. And I'm just gonna call this Render Layers, the project. And the first thing is deciding what type of template we want to use. I think I'm just gonna go with the games blank, or you can do the films blank, but I'll just do games blank because I typically use these game templates. I'll leave everything else the same, that's fine, and I'll press Create. It's going to take some time, so I'll skip through this section. And now you should see something like this once it's all done and loaded. Some of you might have the content drawer not docked like I have it here. I'm going to close these out just so it looks more like yours. On the bottom left corner, the first thing I like to do is actually dock the content drawer by clicking on it and pressing dock in layout. And I just like having this always visible to me. And right now we don't have anything in the project really. The first thing I'd like to do is actually find a project or a 3D environment that we can all use by going to Fab inside of the Epic Games Launcher. So open up the Epic Games Launcher and then underneath Unreal Engine, which we just went to, click on Fab and then click on 3D Environments. And then under price on the top section here, I'm just going to click on price and I'm going to say only show free products. And you should be able to claim this stylized Eastern Village over here. It is completely free forever, unless that changes for some reason. And then you're going to choose add to project, okay? Once you have claimed it. So save it to your library, add to project. And then I'm going to do the project I just added, which is called render layers, and I'm going to add to my project. Okay, that's going to take some time for that to load, so I'll skip through this section as well. All right, once you have done that, you should have this Asian Village project in your Unreal project, and then if you go to the folder, click on Maps, and choose Asian Village Demo, I believe. We'll have at least something to work with and something to test. So if you opened that Asian Village demo level after it's loaded, you should be seeing something like this. Great, now we have something to work with. Let's go to File, Save All to save this project. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go to Edit on the top left and go to Plugins. Okay, and under Plugins, I'm going to go to Movie, Render, Queue. If I turn the checkbox onto this, it's going to ask me to restart now for that change to take effect. I'm going to close that for a second just so I can show you one more setting. Under Edit Project Settings, we're going to search for Engine, Rendering, and then we're going to look for something called Primitive Alpha Holdout Support. Okay, so I'm going to type alpha in here, and then I'm going to click on Alpha Output, turn that on, and then choose Support Primitive Alpha holdout. That's going to ask me to restart as well. So that way we have both those settings turned on before we restart. So that alpha holdout just lets you render out with alpha channels. So don't worry about that. And now we can restart and I'll come back after that. Okay, so now that we have all of our settings set up, the first thing I want to do is make sure that my scene is organized. Now I picked something that wouldn't be organized on purpose. I want to make it clear that you need to organize your work to be able to use this method, or at least have some proper naming conventions. Okay, so the first thing I did here was actually make a new folder by searching for Cliff. So I went Cliff, and then I selected everything inside of that. I'm doing this by pressing left click, and then I hold shift and click on the bottom one here. And if you press on create new folder containing the current selection, it's going to add a new folder, and then you're going to name it accordingly. Okay, I'm going to press X on this word so that we can search for different things. If I press on the eyeball here, we'll see that um, everything that is inside of that folder will turn off. For the purposes of this tutorial, I'm just going to turn off these trees because they are instanced. I don't want to have to deal with that right now. So let's just turn off the trees. And we can actually add these waterfalls. So if I search for waterfall, I'm going to select all three of these and I'm going to right click and I'm going to say move to over here, cliffs. And because we have a folder, it's easy to do this and just move things around. Now, if we turn off the eyeballs, everything in the background will be gone. Okay. Now, I'm going to also do the landscape, this water, and these two effects as a separate layer as well. So I'm going to click on the landscape, I'm going to click on the water, and I'm going to make a new folder, same way I did this. I'm going to press the plus, and I'm going to name this, let's just name it foreground. Okay, if we turn that off, we'll see that that goes away. If we want these water noise meshes as well, we can search for them, and then we can right click, again, move to, we have that new folder called foreground. Okay, I'm going to minimize these two folders, and now we have a folder for, I'm going to delete this instance actor actually, just for the purposes of this. And then if we turn on and off the foreground, we'll see that that goes away. The cliffs will go away, and then everything else can be its own layer. So I'm going to select everything else, and I'm going to create a new folder, and hopefully it doesn't crash the computer, but let's call this village. Okay. Actually, we want to make sure that the camera and all of these lights, like the exponential height fog and everything, are not inside of that folder. So let's grab all the lights, the post process, the sky sphere, the skylight. That should be good. So we just want to get all the static meshes, and then I'm going to move these to its own section. So if you hold left click and drag to the top section here, it's going to add that to the root, so it's outside of the village folder. If we turn the village on and off, we'll see now that the village is its separate section. Okay, so we have three sections. We can render them all three of them separately, and then we can composite them later on in our own software, like Premiere. Okay, so that's the first step. Organize your work, make sure it's organized so that you can separate each section easily. And now we're going to move on to how to actually separate and render. Okay, great. So now that we have everything organized how we like, what I'd like to do now is create a new folder in my content, and I'm going to call that new folder. I'm clicking on the folder, I'm right clicking in the empty section, and I'm pressing new folder. I'm going to call this sequences, and then I'm going to double click inside of there, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to say level sequence. Whenever I create a level sequence, I will abbreviate and I'll put ls underscore, and then I'll give the name of the camera. We're going to call it shot 01. There shouldn't be a camera in here already, so let me go to on the top section here where there's a plus with a cube, and then I'm going to go to cameras, cinematic. I'm going to go to Cine Camera Actor. I'm going to add that into the scene, and from there, what I want to do is give that camera a name. I'm going to say cam underscore shot 01, just being more organized. Okay, we're going to save everything. We're going to file save all. Just make sure you're constantly saving in case you're getting crashes. Okay, and we're going to set up this camera's animation. I'm going to double click inside of this level sequence. And right now there's nothing inside of it, but if we left click and drag this into that level sequence over here, we're going to be inside of our camera. Now, to be inside of your camera, it's as easy as clicking on this blue icon right here to be inside of camera shot 1 so that we can properly control it. That's the same thing as going up here to the top right and going to select a different camera that you have created, like cam shot 1. You'd be inside of it controlling that edge. You just won't get the edges if you do it that way. So I'm going to eject out of that, and I'm going to go back and click on this blue icon, the camera icon, and I'm going to set up my shot. I might want to have the focal length a little bit smaller, like maybe 15. If I want an establishing shot of everything, let's just do something like that. Okay, so here's my shot. And the first thing I'm going to do is under the camera's transforms or location, I'm going to click on this icon to add a keyframe, which says its place and time. Then I'm going to drag this slider all the way to the end, and all I'm going to do is zoom in a little bit just so that we can see that this works with motion and not just still frames. I'm going to press on transform icon again, and then we'll have a camera animation. Right now it's easing in and easing out. If you want to change that, you just select both these icons, left clicking and dragging. I right click and I choose linear. Okay. Now we're going to get a little bit more of a smooth motion. So just a simple establishing shot to test, practice rendering something with different layers. Okay, now what we're going to do is I'm going to press file save all again. Okay. Now that we have saved our shot, our level sequence, let's open up the movie render queue, the plugin we just enabled. I'm going to go to the window on the top left, and I'm going to type movie, and we're going to get the movie render queue. And now we'll have a window open up down here. We can press on plus for the render, and we're going to choose, we want to render shot 1. Okay. And the first thing I want to do is click on this drop-down menu. And under configuration type, choose movie render graph. Don't worry that it says beta, it won't be a problem. And then instead of default render graph, it makes sure not to save over this or edit over this. There's a yellow warning sign, otherwise you won't have the default render anymore inside of here. So make sure that is set there. Go to File, Save As, and save this as a new version. Okay, I've saved it as Asian Village, so we're gonna open up that one. To do that, I'm gonna click on the drop-down menu over here, and then we have a section that says Asian Village. Okay, if I click on that one, if you have saved as and give it a new name, you'll be fine. I clicked on that one, and this is what we're met with. I'm not gonna go over much of this right now. I'm just gonna go over these 3 sections really. Okay, so the first thing is the default for this render is set to JPEG sequence. If you wanted to change that to like a PNG sequence or in EXR for higher quality, you can do that. I'm just going to do right click and I'm going to say PNG for the purposes of this. And I'm going to change it to PNG sequence. And there we go. Okay, so now whatever we render is going to be a bunch of PNGs one singular frame image PNG for every single frame. Okay. Uh, what we want to do is create some folders inside of here that say which things we want to separate for our renders. To do that, we're going to create a collection. So I'm doing right click. You can press tab or right click and then collection. Spelling it right would be nice, and then collection. I'm just going to drag this in here. Collection, I'm going to press the plus for condition group. And you'll see when we do this, we get a drop-down menu for condition groups where we can choose actor names, actors, actor layers, a bunch of stuff. We can even choose the other folders that we created. Okay. If you wanted to do actor names and you've been properly naming all of your assets, then you can do things like star, cliff. All of our cliffs are called cliff or have cliff in the name, and then star. That will select everything that has the word cliff in it. If you want it to be more specific, you can do sm_cliff, and then it would automatically select everything that has cliff inside of it rather than you having to organize it in here. I like to just have my folders organized and then I'll use folders inside of here. It's just a little bit more clean in my opinion. So I'm going to make a collection, and inside of the condition group, I'm going to choose editor folder. Okay. And for editor folder, next to it, we'll have a thing that says add content. If I click on the drop-down menu for add content, I can choose the entire folder that I have in my scene called cliffs. Okay, so there's a collection for cliffs, and we're going to give that name, cliffs, and then I'm going to add another collection and another collection. Okay, so we're basically just defining what we want to separate using those folders that we have created. I'm choosing condition groups, and then I'm choosing the folder, and I'm choosing the specific thing. Okay, foreground for that one. Let's name it foreground. Then I'm clicking on this third one. I'm choosing condition group, drop down menu, folder, and then I'm choosing village. Okay, this one is called village. Now, just so that you know, you can also create a collection with multiple conditions. So if I wanted to create one that had actor names in it and then also add another one, I can press this plus. So I can choose a specific actor and then actors with specific names, and it will add all of those things. I can press plus. And if you wanted to press and instead, you can do that and then subtract. So you can make specific collections that way. Typically, organizing things and giving them the proper names should be enough for you to render them in separate passes. Okay, I'm going to delete that, and you're going to have to get all of these collections to go through each other for the render layers to know what those sections are. And now what we need to do is actually modify each render. Okay, so I'm going to create multiple render layers. So I'm going to type render layer, and I'm going to Control C, Control V. So we have 3 separate render layers, one for each one of these collections. The first one I'm going to call foreground. The second one I'm going to call village. Third one I'm going to call, you guessed it, cliffs. Okay, so now we have 3 separate render layers, but if we just plug these in, they have nowhere to go. Oh, except for that because I forgot that. So they'll have nowhere to go to output because if you plug this in, it will take the place of that one. And then to create more outputs for this output section, we press the plus on the left side, and then we can rename them by clicking on them and going to the first one, which is actually foreground instead of default layer. foreground, and then I'm going to call this village. I'm going to call this one the output. I'm going to call it cliffs. Okay, so now we have an output section for each one of these. Now, even though we have defined these collections, we have not separated them from each other yet. So we're going to have to do that with a node called a modifier. Okay, so if I right click and I search for modifier, we'll get something that looks like this. Okay, so all we have done is define the collections. We have not modified what the render is going to do to them. So we're going to have to plug this in, and we're going to have 3 of these because each render is going to have separate modifications. And then we're going to plug them into the actual render layers to render them properly. Okay. Now, don't worry about plugging this into multiple places because all of these are just telling these modifiers what each collection is or what each section is and what we want to modify. From here, you'll see under the modifier, it doesn't have a name. I'm going to call it village mod just for the sake of this. And then I'm going to call this one foreground. Oh, I did that in the wrong order. Let's call this one foreground mod. Foreground mod. This one we're going to call village mod. This last one we're going to call cliffs mod. Okay. Now, under the modifier, we have to choose what we want to do to each collection. So if we click on this right here, we can choose a specific collection. So since this is the foreground modifier, I'm just going to consider this as the layer that I want to render just the foreground. So I'm going to add the cliffs here, and I'm going to add the village here. So both the cliffs and the village collections, which I have identified here and identified through the folders, have been identified. And then if we choose as hidden, it's going to render them as if they were hidden. So if I turn the eyeballs off for the village and the cliffs, this is what it would render an image of. But if I wanted to, if I wanted to render them with shadows on while it's still hidden, there's a section where I can say cast shadow while hidden, and we can turn that on or off. And then also affect indirect lighting while hidden, you can turn that on or off as well. Right now, if we turn on holdout, it's going to make sure that it's hidden and it's also already doing the indirect lighting and the shadows. So just holdout is enough, but holdout will also render it as if it was an alpha. So it would separately render an alpha channel for that. If you don't want the alpha and you just want to render each section with lights and shadows, but they're hidden, you would do it this way. I'm going to do it with the holdout setting since we've turned that on. And make sure the checkboxes are off. There you go. Holdout is turned on, and then that's going to be my modifier for my foreground. Okay. Now, just to test that out, right now I'm going to press save. With these render layers have no modifications to them yet, so you'll see what that turns out to be. I'm going to press file save all because sometimes when I render my computer can crash. So let's go to the movie render queue window. And under this window, what we want to do is make sure that it says Asian Village. That's the one we just created, the graph here. And then under the renders, we're all good. I'm going to press render local. Hopefully you've chosen a place for it to go. I think it will default go to the saved folders location in your Unreal project. And you'll see exactly what the renders are for the foreground, the village, and the cliffs. Now you see here the foreground is rendering with that alpha channel, but you still see all those shadows and the indirect lighting as well. All right, so for the other two, if you want them to also render with transparency, you have to make sure to click on your graph here and make sure that holdout is turned on for them as well. Okay, make sure that the cast shadows is on. I think it will default do it, but just make sure that it's on as well. So holdout and cast shadows is turned on. The rest of it should be automatic. Press save and then render it out, and you're gonna get uh, all three of them with transparency now. Now, for the holdout, you cannot turn off the indirect or the shadows. So you're gonna need to render it with those if you want to do a holdout render. All right, for the renders, I had to change one thing. Just make sure to delete the light mask volume because it was causing issues for me in the render. Here we are in Adobe Premiere. If I press import media, you just have to make sure to find your image sequences that you rendered. It should be in your Unreal Engine folder under saved movie renders by default. And then make sure image sequence is turned down here at the bottom. And you press on the first one in the list and press open. And that's going to be your cliffs. Right click, import, and just do this with all three. Right click, import, and just make sure you're clicking on the first one and image sequence is turned on and you should be good. The village and then the cliffs. And it looks like I added the cliffs twice, my bad. Foreground, there we go. And you should get nice and clean renders, and it should be easy to implement this into your 2D projects out, because now you can add your 2D characters in front of or behind of whichever sections you would like. All right, now on to the making it look more 2D part. The first thing I'm going to do is go into the content folder. Over here, I'm going to right click and I'm going to make a new folder called materials, and double click inside of there. I'm going to make a new folder called post process, and then double click inside of there and right click and make a new material. Okay. Whenever I make a master material that is post process, I abbreviate MMPP and then I'll give it a name. This first one, I'm going to name it cartoon. Cartoon. And we're going to double click inside of it. Okay. And this is going to open our material window. The first thing I want to do on this is click on it and then change the material domain from surface to post process. Okay. So this is going to change it so it's not something that's affecting a 3D model, but is affecting the output of the camera, the rendered pixels. Okay. Now I'm going to scroll down and change one more setting, and that's going to be the blendable location for the post-process settings. I'm going to change it to scene color after depth of field. Okay, so there's the two settings. Now we could make our own. I'm just going to quickly grab ones that have been provided to me by the amazing and talented Edward Bennet. So I'm going to go to this website. I'll have the links below. I'm going to copy the code for this, and the way to do that is just press here. You can Control A, Control C, and open up Unreal Engine. And it's as easy as opening up the Blender node and pressing Command V. Okay, and then you can drag that post-process material in here. And it'll show you a little preview of what it is doing to the scene. I'm not going to be explaining the whole of this, but essentially it's detecting the edges of things and then adding a black outline to it, and then adding a little bit of brightness to the colors. These two are parameters, meaning we're going to be able to change them if we make an instance of this material, and I'll show you that in a second. Okay. First thing is we need a post-process volume. Now in this project there already is one, and let's see if it actually has any materials on it. It does. So if we turn this off, we'll see what that's doing to the scene. If we turn it on or off, I'm actually just going to turn that off completely. So we're turning off the post-process volume, and that's how it looks without the edited colors and the edited settings of that. And what I want to do is go to add, and I'm going to search for post process volume. We're going to add that here. Okay, so just in case you wanted your own scene to have your own version of a post process. First thing I'm going to do is actually go and search inside of this post process volume that we've named. I'm going to search for infinite. Okay, infinite extent unbound, and we're going to tick that on. All that does is I don't have to scale this box to the size of the world. It's just gonna, anything inside of this level is going to be affected by the settings in this post-process volume. Okay. Now, what we're gonna do next is search for material. And under post-process materials, there is a tab here. We can press on the plus to add a new option. Choose an asset reference. Okay, so now we can drag and drop a material into this, and it's going to affect whatever the camera is seeing through this post-process volume using this material. I'm not going to use the master material. I'm going to right-click and create a material instance. Okay, this is going to allow us to change those values we were talking about more easily, and I'm going to call it an MI, material instance post-process. Okay, I'm going to drag that into here, and you're going to see what that's doing to our scene. Okay, if we double click inside of this material instance, we can see the parameters that we had before, and we can actually edit the brightness to be higher or lower depending on what we would like. I don't think we can decrease the line thickness below 2 for this. Let's see. Yeah, it just goes away. So I'm going to change the line thickness back to 2, and you see how that one looks like. There's some other ones we can implement, and I'll show you that in a second. There's one that just adds outlines without adding the brightness, which we could technically do with the one right here by changing the brightness to 1, I believe. But I think the one with just the outlines is a little bit better, so I'm going to make a duplicate of this master material, Control C, Control V, and I'm going to call this one outlines. I'm going to double click, and again, since it already has the post-process settings that I want, all I have to do is delete all of this. And there's another one I've provided in the link below called Black Outlines. And you can copy and paste this into here. Apply and save. And let's see how this one looks with the outlines. So it's just going to add a little bit of a black edge onto everything and make it look a little bit more cartoony. Now the post-process settings that were in the other one, I kind of like, so I'm going to turn those back on. It's not as much of an eyesore. Or we could actually just use this post-process volume and add more by pressing the plus and drag and drop more asset references into here. Okay, and then we can actually delete this old one. The last one I would like to show, it's a really cool one, is the Kuwahara filter. So let's go back into the Kuwahara post process, and I'm going to copy this entire thing. And I'm going to make a new one. Let's just use the outlines for now. I'm going to delete this. I'm going to paste it in here. And I'm going to put this right here. Press save. Okay. This one I'm going to rename to Kuwahara. And I'm going to right click and I'm going to make a material instance of that. I'm going to drag that into the post-process option here. And now you'll see this makes it a little bit of a painterly effect. You can actually double click on this as well and change some of the parameters to smaller numbers or bigger numbers depending on what you would like if you don't want the painterly effect to be too strong. Okay, so just some things you can add to make your scene tie more into your 2D animation. Great, hopefully that was helpful, and good luck on your creations.